Good afternoon, this is 1856 with Freud. I've come to tell you about my theory of moral development of young children's minds, which obviously is to do with my psychosexual stages of development. To start with, the id. Now, the id operates on the pleasure principle, and this is basically the thing that takes. It has a sack for taking. It takes what it wants, and it doesn't care about morality or any of society's views. It just is your wants and your desires. This is your ego. Now, the ego is the reality principle, and this means that it is your leveler between your superego, which I will come on to, and your id's desires. And what it does is it levels them out and causes you to do an action that seems mediocre in between these two objects. Now, lastly, of course, there's always one, we have the superego. Now, the superego operates on a morality principle, which you do not acquire until you've completed your Oedipus or Electra complex. Now, this means, obviously, because of this complex, that girls are morally weaker. Why? Now, the reason you're saying this, shut up, is, yes, the reason girls are morally weaker is because that they do not identify with their mothers as easily as men do, because that they already fear their mother because they do not have a penis. Now, because the boy fears that his father will castrate him, this means that he fears him more and will identify with him more. Back you go. Now, some other crazy psychologists have said that my work doesn't quite add up, and that I said that conscience emerges by the age of 6 years, which I think is very relative, to be honest. But people like Piaget and Kohlberg, who I have studied a little bit earlier, or later on in this video, that it continues over a much longer period, although I don't believe this at all. I believe it all happens up to the age of 6 years old. Now, obviously, because this is psychology, everyone wants a few reasons as to why things happen. So I've come up with a nice explanation about a man called Jason who goes to the cinema with his girlfriend. Now, obviously, he's watching this film, and the man behind him keeps talking on his phone about how the film ends, and all the characters are not very good. And so, Jason's id happens to be overflowing with dominance and aggression. So Jason's ego sees this as an opportunity to release some aggressive energy towards this man, because he is being annoying. And so he turns around, well, he could turn around and say, "Shut up, pal, I'm gonna kick your ass." Well, but then his ego also takes into account there are other factors. The fact that, well, they're in the cinema, which is the environment, how big the other person is, which is a threat to your action, and, well, if his showing of his dominance aggression will impress his lovely girlfriend. Basically, this example illustrates that the ego is more likely to show that Jason will not act impulsively, but will consider the consequences. If the other man looks weak, and his girlfriend is easily impressed by tough guys, Jason will take the opportunity to release a mess of anger and open a can of whoop-ass. Anyway, Freud called this final, well, I called this final part of the personality the superego, which is also known as the morality principle. The superego is a part of personality which influences us to act in ways which we find morally acceptable. It can be thought of as a set of moral principles guiding action. The id is present at birth. It is the pleasure principle. It demands immediate gratification and instinctual needs. The superego is the morality principle. It includes moral beliefs leading ego to do good or to feel guilt for doing wrong. It develops from 4 to 6 years old. These two things come together and are balanced by the ego, which is the reality principle, and looks for opportunities for gratification, deciding on action, and it develops in the first 3 years. The ego looks at the two things in between the id and the superego, and this forms the resulting behaviour. The above 3 aforementioned things are actually components of the self. The components of the self operate without internal conflict. Well, most of it sometimes. For example, if a woman wants to have sex with a man who is her regular partner, and the man is willing, and the situation is convenient, there is no conflict between the instinctual desires of her id, the libido, and the contents of her superego. However, conflicts do occur. For example, imagine you're very thirsty, but you have no money. You pass a refreshment still stacked with chilled bottle of drinks. There are a few people around, and the stall attendant is reading a newspaper. It would be easy for you to take a drink without paying for it. Your id's drive for self-preservation motivates you to take the drink. Your ego recognizes that there is little risk involved in taking the drink, but your superego includes the belief that it is wrong to steal. Whether you go ahead and steal the drink is up to you, but it will depend on several factors, such as how strong your motivation is, for example, how thirsty you are, and how strong your conscience is. I also believe that to develop morally as a child, you must have 2 same-sex parents. This is because the Oedipus and the electrocomplex can't fully happen if there are not 2 same-sex parents in the child's upbringing, and this means the child will fail to develop. If, though, it has been proven that there is one parent, for example, if the mother is in situational and the father is not, that this can still cause the child to develop morally, normally. I do not believe this. I believe there must be 2 same, different sex parents. Other people found, apparently, this woman called Bandura et al. In 1963, which I thought was... Never mind. She found that in imitating the aggressive behaviour of other adults, that's what they did, in general. Now, I don't believe this. I personally believe that you must have the parents, and the morals and the id, ego and superego only come from the parents.